And I held her and I said, it's okay. Now that we could define it, we could attack it. Let's find a way. And it didn't take more than a few moments after that we looked at each other and we said, what about Ethan?
You just lost your loved one. Now what? Welcome to the Grief and Life podcast, where we explore this new reality through grief-colored lenses. Openly, authentically, I'm your host, Nina Rodriguez. Let's get started. How do you keep hope alive when you find yourself in a race against time to save your child's life? Today's guests are Bryan and Danielle Docobo, whose journey through love, loss, and purpose is as powerful and inspiring as it is heartbreaking. Danielle is a pediatric nurse, bringing deep compassion to families in crisis through her professional and personal experience. And Bryan is a well-established closing attorney and co-host of the Gentleman's Tribe Show, airing weekly across South Florida. Today, however, you'll be hearing from them as Ethan and Liam's parents, a husband and wife team who co-founded the Coats Plus Foundation after losing their youngest son, Ethan, to this rare genetic disorder. Now they continue to fight for their 8-year-old son, Liam, who lives with the same life-threatening condition. Our hope is that through this conversation, we reach the right hearts at the right time, because you never know if you might be the person who can make a difference in Liam's story and all who have been affected by this life-threatening syndrome. With that said, Bryan and Danielle, welcome to the Grief and Light podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
It's an absolute honor. And for everybody listening and watching, this is a very personal episode for me. We met about 10 years ago, roughly, under very different circumstances. We were both in the real estate world prior to knowing any type of loss and grief in this context. And this is, once again, proof that life truly can change in the blink of an eye. And before we delve into the story, again, I just want to reach everybody's hearts listening and watching, and really search within yourself to see if there is some piece of this puzzle that you can help put together. So as we get started, I would love to hear from both Bryan and Danielle. Who was Ethan, and what was life like before this diagnosis?
Go ahead.
Well,
Big question.
life is life is a roller coaster even before this, but I think that's just the nature of life. And in the midst of that, we starting a family, buying the house, worrying about, are we buying in the right school district? Are we, Danielle and I used to live on the beach in Fort Lauderdale, and the thought of moving to suburbia was just, like a fate worse than death. But then we made our way out here to plan a life. And, thinking about this, everything that we've done in our lives, going to school, going to grad school or going to law school, having an income, having a career, trying to pick the perfect spouse, or that would be the best mother, best wife. And likewise, hopefully she was thinking the same about me. Everything we did in our life was to have a family. And we do have a family. It was just a bit different than we expected. So when we had children, we had a very interesting birth history with both of them. The doctors didn't know what was going on, and they said, hey, this was an aberration when we had Liam. It was low amniotic fluid. Everything was going along swimmingly with the pregnancy. And then all of a sudden, surprise, Liam's got to come at 34 weeks. And when he came, he was 2 pounds, 12 ounces, very small. And while that was dramatic in and of itself, he ended up growing and becoming this happy boy and completely healthy, or so it seemed. We got to a place where we decided to have another child, give Liam a little brother or sister. And that came in the form of a boy, Ethan. And the aberration where we were told this will never happen again happened again. And ultimately, that time was a little more intense. Ethan came at 27 weeks, 1 pound, 6 ounces. and had additional complications in the birth history. But even then, we spent 4 months in the NICU. He came home, and we were a happy family. We were all under one roof. And Ethan, at the time, seemed like he was progressing along as normal. And maybe it was just something with her body, something we didn't understand. But we felt that we were on a path. Um, Shortly, a few months into it, we realized that we may have additional challenges where we were where he was starting to refuse the bottle. We had some, you know, failure to thrive issues. Other thing, wasn't hitting his milestones like rolling over and things of that nature as we'd have hoped, but he was a happy kid. He was smiling. He had this laughter and love to his heart. And even if, he couldn't, he's a child, you felt the essence in his soul was there for you. Okay. So, we still have, I feel, a wonderful relationship with Ethan. Um, and we were a happy family. While we were going through the challenges with Ethan, it was brought to our attention from Liam's school that he was having some learning difficulties, and other things. Now, as parents, we were, hitting the ground running, getting him counselors and things of that nature. And, and we felt sad in the sense of we're so focused on Ethan and this traumatic event that did we take our eye off of Liam? Did we drop the ball as parents? Did we mess up somehow and have him on a path to where he's not going to achieve his milestones and be where he's supposed to be in time? It was shortly after where Liam was 4 years old. Ethan must have been 1 years old, where Liam had a grand mal seizure, which is terrifying, terrifying. And that was probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to see. He was rushed to the hospital, and at the hospital, they did an MRI as a standard operating procedure at times where these seizures would happen. And they discovered calcifications and cysts all over his brain. And as Danielle's a pediatric nurse and able to read this information, and we're tapped into the app, I'll never forget reading the words on that MRI report, which read, long-standing, ongoing, destructive process. We didn't have a diagnosis at that point in time, but we had options for diagnoses, and none of them were promising. It was shortly after that I got a call from our doctor, and Danielle was working that day at the same hospital. And she says, hey, Bryan, I think you need to come in, you and Danielle. And I said, do we have a diagnosis? And she just said, Bryan, you need to come in. And I said, is this the kind of thing where Danielle would be able to go to work after? Or should I try to make arrangements for her to have the rest of the day off? And she said, I think that Danielle's going to want to go home after we meet today. So, unbeknownst to Danielle, I called her supervisor, and I said, hey, is it okay if we have the rest of the day off? And of course, Joe DiMaggio's Children's Hospital has a team of people that are lovely human beings and people that have supported Danielle greatly. It was a no-brainer. They said yes, of course. And we went into Dr. Arroyo's office, and she got back the results from a genetic report. And she said that he tested positive for Coats Plus. Danielle immediately hit the floor, inconsolable. And I'm just standing there as a husband and father, knowing I have to be the strong one in this moment. And I held her. And I said, it's okay. Now that we could define it, we could attack it. Let's find a way. And it didn't take more than a few moments after that we looked at each other and we said, what about Ethan? And in our hearts, we already knew the answer. We already knew. And it was confirmed just a few weeks later that both our children have this life-shortening rare disease. It's really quite a disease. It every cell in their body is malfunctioning, leads to certain destructions. The blood vessels in their body as a manifestation are bleeding, leads to swelling in the eyes, retinal detachment in the brain. It causes calcifications and cysts. It leads to bleeding throughout the body, including the GI tract, and that's ultimately how we lost Ethan. As part of this process also, it's leukodystrophy. So while we take a healthy child like Liam that could run and play, it's watching him break down in front of us, watch his confidence erode, and frustrations that he may not be able to do what the other kids do. It's a tough thing to watch. And the hopes and dreams and expectations we had of our children with each phase is a whole nother grieving process.
I'm going to take a pause here, and I want to acknowledge just that was really hard to get through, and my voice is even shaky because just even listening and imagining what that was like is it truly is just devastating. I want to acknowledge that this is grief. There is so much grief in this, and this is something that lasts a lifetime, and it will impact you for the rest of your lives. And no matter how much we learn about life after loss and embrace that we are always connected, at the end of the day, this is truly, truly devastating. And I am so deeply sorry for all of it. And I thank you for your willingness to share. And, if you're listening and watching and can relate to this experience, my heart goes out to you, our hearts go out to you as well. And the importance of sharing these stories is because this is not something that should be experienced in loneliness. We don't want Bryan and Danielle to be alone in this, and we don't want other parents to be alone in this. So this is really a tough conversation, but I also thank you for shedding light on it and educating, creating awareness, and sharing your story. It's so very important. Your tears are so very welcome here. It's all part of it. So thank you. I also want to highlight that this is, not only just rare, but it's very rare. It's on the spectrum of rarity. It's pretty significant. So if you could give some perspective on, what is Codes Plus and in layman's term and not scientific or medical terms, obviously, but just an overarching view of what it is. You already explained that it affects the eyes and it's something that seems to be degenerative. I don't know if that's the appropriate word, but
No, it's appropriate. It's and I'm going to try not to get scientific or overly technical, but a little bit might be necessary. This disease has only been understood since 2012, where Dr. Yannick Crow out of Edinburgh, United Kingdom, discovered the link between this genetic mutation and this particular disease. So it's very new. It's so new, in fact, we had nothing. Doctors didn't know anything about this disease. We've been to Boston's Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, the National Institute of Health, the Miami Stem Cell Institute, and there was just nothing. So out of this, Danielle and I looked at each other and we said, are we going to give these kids the best life that we could give them? Or are we going to try to make a difference? And very quickly we said, let's do both. So we started a foundation, the first of its kind, the Codes Plus Foundation, to battle this rare disease. Every parent I connected with said I thought we were the only ones. We've come to learn our community is much broader. We started the first Facebook page on this. We started the first attempts to interconnect a broader community. And out of those connections, and out of, quite frankly, my weekends, my spare time, this is before ChatGPT, was sitting down and reading these medical journals where everything looks like hieroglyphics, but when it's your kid, you're going to figure it out. We were able to come across a study where it wasn't the same disease, but it was a similar disease, Lebrun syndrome, where it manifested with calcifications and cysts in the brain. We learned from that report that in that study, they gave a specific type of drug, an anti-VEGF drug, that got rid of the bad blood vessels in the body. We were able to collaborate. There was a child out of Missouri, that was the first one to receive this treatment. And in his brain, the calcifications and cysts stopped too. So we're able to get control over the angiogenesis that was leading to this poor outcome. Now, this is a Band-Aid. It is not a treatment to really repair, but at least when we're looking at the MRI, we're not seeing those progressions anymore, which is fantastic. And also gets rid of the inflammation, which in turn is an additional part to the leukodystrophy. Unfortunately, Wyatt, that lived in Missouri, he was older. He was 16 years old, and he is now passed on. The day that I flew out to his funeral, his mother, who is a director of the Coats Plus Foundation as well, when I saw her and she saw me for the first time with her own eyes, we hugged and we broke down. And while it was tremendously sad, what brought us together, there was that feeling of lifting each other up in that moment. And as I was at the celebration of life after the funeral, I got a call from Dr. Arroyo, and she said, "You need to get your wife on the phone." Because that's when we learned the calcification and cystic process in our children's brain stopped too. And it was because of the heroic efforts of Laura Atkins fighting for her son's life, Wyatt, where we were able to leverage that to get that treatment for our children too. Now, the journey doesn't end there because we were still seeing a breakdown in cognitive decline and motor skill, function. So we ended up going the path, and this is unfortunately after Ethan passed on, which we'll get to, but we were able to get stem cells as a treatment for my child. We had to go to Cabo for the first treatment, but now because of legislation being passed in Florida, there's an avenue for us to be able to drive 30 minutes to get the same treatment for our kid here. Now, this is where I'm going to get a little technical because I think this is important for your viewers, specifically for your viewers that are battling a rare disease where there's cellular dysfunction. Stem cells is taking stem cells from a healthy outside source. Their power is once they're put into your body, they could differentiate, meaning they could turn into any different cell in your body. It could become a bone cell, it could become a muscle cell, it could become an endothelial cell, the system that leads to those bad blood vessels. So as the stem cells go in the body, it recreates and adds health to that system. And another thing that the endothelial cells do, other than the angiogenesis, the creation of those blood vessels, is that it creates and maintains the brain-blood barrier. In different endothelial diseases, we've learned that there's a collapse of that brain-blood barrier. And when that collapse happens, it leads to a leukodystrophy. So getting these stem cell treatments, we have seen an immediate positive impact on Liam. All right. Now, we need to have more access in this country, and we're going to get into the call to action at the end of this, but this is very much going to be a part of it. Okay. Also, in our fight for Liam, thank goodness for ChatGPT because it does streamline some things. But also with the working knowledge that I had, I was able to utilize that tool, upload my child's mutations, get an understanding what those mutations were, lay that against other gene therapies taking place already around the world based on different studies, and I found a treatment for my son too. About 2 weeks ago, I put something on Facebook and I said, you know what? I got the answer. I just need somebody to say yes. Now, as an attorney, when people approach me, I don't like people saying, "Hey, Brian, I got this problem, figure it out." I like when people, come to me with a little bit more information and design. So with this thought process, I said, what's going to differentiate our child's cause with the other people sending emails? Because there's a lot. Matter of fact, 2 weeks ago, there was a specific gene therapy that was performed for a child at a children's hospital in Philadelphia. So now this is becoming, very much exploding these types of hope for families like ours. So what I did was I constructed an email which got very technical, where a geneticist could read it and understand what's going on. It's just not saying, "Hey, I got this problem, help me out." It's saying, "Hey, here's the problem. These are the mutations. These are the type of mutations. These are gene therapies that are applicable to solving this. Here are the studies where I'm getting this information from. Take a look at it and tell me if this makes sense. About, what are we, Tuesday? About 5 days ago, no, a week ago, I received an email because I was blasting these emails out to everyone. It said, Mr. Docobo, your email was forwarded to me. I think we should talk. And it was the top gene scientist at a university in Miami. And 5 days ago, I had that call with him. We talked about it. He looked at it, he goes, you wrote this? And I was like, yeah. He's like, there's geneticists that can't write it. I was like, well, it's me, myself, and ChatGPT. I had to tell the ChatGPT part. But, why not? And he says, this makes sense. You're onto something. He had other ideas of different gene therapies when we spoke about it. But we have somebody that's on board that we might be able to save Liam's life. Okay? Now, I think there is a lot of work, and we're going to get to the call to action later on, okay, where this is all gonna make sense, because there's a call to action for families like ours that are going through this, that we need that support. And I think that also what needs to be discussed here is that rare disease affects 7% of the population. I don't have a rare disease. My wife doesn't have a rare disease, but she's a mother. I'm a father. It affects us too. And it affects my parents, and it affects my sisters, and it affects everybody in our orbit that is walking this path too. We are now reaching a place in science where we see these as being different diseases. It's more about the technology to cure these diseases. We might be on the precipice of getting things done, but now it needs to be organized. It needs to be streamlined. We need to have a way for insurance to be able to cover these things and these treatments with the stem cells, because even if we cure my kid's disease today, we need to rebuild his functions that have been lost by the use of stem cells and other rejuvenative measures. Okay? So the thing is this. Our decision as a family, when we were going through this grieving process, and we're still grieving, and the loss of Ethan is profound, which we're going to get more into. But I'm telling you, any family out there going through this, it's one day at a time, it's one step at a time, but you got to keep moving forward, because you never know where you're going to get. When we got that diagnosis and we were crushed and scared and terrified, and everything we built through our entire life looked like it was on the precipice of crumbling. We didn't choose this path, it chose us. But what do you do with it? And our communities need to have strength and people around us to lift us up, to just nudge us forward just a little bit. Because if all the families start taking the steps that other families took to get to a path, if we all collectively do this in our mission, we could get somewhere that is profound and change the world. And now we live in a time where this is feasible. This isn't just motivational talk. We have AI, we have gene therapies, we have different things now that make this tangible and real. We could get there. But I think that there needs to be more organization and more streamlined way of getting these done for our families. And that's something I'm very passionate about. And so some of the projects that I'm involved in personally. And as we develop these, we want to share it with the world, because we feel like let me take a step back to go forward. I know I'm talking a lot here, but I know my wife, when she needs
Your time, go ahead.
held up. There was, when we were going through this grieving process, grief is handled in different ways by different people. The way I dealt with this grief is, if I'm sitting idly, I'm going to break down. But if I get to work and take action, it's a way of me dealing with that grief. My wife's way of dealing with it was she delved into a very deep spirituality. And I can't tell you how much that has brought to my life in our experience. When she's getting into a deeper understanding of herself and souls and things that are discussed by Eckhart Tolle and the other gurus out there, which were religions, I think there's a lot of overlap. And when you peel away the veneer of the institution and you come to a returning of the soul and where we're from, I think that's something that needs to be more broadly understood. And at a point in time, I realized in my journey, I don't think this happened to us by accident. I believe we were chosen. And I believe that we had to walk the fire to become who we are today. And in that becoming, I believe there's a broader blueprint of the responsibilities that we have to change the world. This could happen to anybody. It happened to a pediatric nurse. I'm not a doctor, but I know how to talk to people. I know how to organize. And in grief, it's the becoming. It's the idea of spring. Is spring about the flowers or the change we bring to the world, or spring about the struggle it takes to crack that seed open and grow? And the cracking of the soul never would have happened if it wasn't for the profound grief and loss that we've experienced, that we're going through, and that we're walking. And the question is what do we do with it? What do we do with it? And I said this before the podcast, and I'm going to say it again here for your viewers. You and I have known each other, not from the purview of grief. We've known each other before, and the grief came to us. I've been watching you. I've been following your story. And while it's not my place to say, I'm not your father, I'm not your... Man, I am proud of you. Because the thing is that you toed the path of saying, how can I turn this great pain and turn it into something beautiful? You are spring. You are that cracking. You are that growth. And what we're seeing here on this podcast, these are the flowers that are blooming. And I said this before, but I want to say thank you in this moment for providing this
I want to
platform.
thank you as well.
And keep carrying that on.
I fully receive your words, and I'm very grateful for everything you shared. And I see you. I see you both. I see you answering the question, now what, to the best of your ability. And you're choosing to give the meaning that you want for the full life of your son, Liam, and Ethan as well, and yourself. In extension to that, helping other people who may come after you in this experience. And I want to, first of all, thank you again for your willingness to be vulnerable and your willingness to be open and authentic. I want to also back up a little bit because you touched on so much that I do want to address. And specifically, I want to acknowledge that this is a mother and father's love for their child that resulted in finding all of these answers that perhaps, like you said, had this been somebody else, maybe you wouldn't have these answers because yes, it was 2012, but the answers are coming now, unfortunately, and unfortunately at the same time. So what you're doing, it feels heroic. It sounds heroic when I hear it. And hopefully that call that you received 5 days ago from the specialist at the University of Miami, I pray and I give it all my positive energy so that we can find the answers that are needed, the missing pieces. And it also sounds like the solution wouldn't just help Coates plus syndrome. It sounds like the solution would help many rare diseases. But before we go there, Danielle, if you're up to it, if not, that's also very okay. I respect, where you are right now and what you're feeling. This is a lot. This is intense. But you currently work in the pediatric department at Joe DiMaggio. When you received the news, did you understand what was happening and to what degree? And perhaps share a little bit about your side of the story as well.
Yeah, anything that says leukodystrophy is not good. I've seen kids with all types of chromosomal disorders, genetic disorders, rare life-shortening disorders, traumatic, issues. But as soon as I saw leukodystrophy, it was just like a shot to the heart. Like, that's something you typically don't survive. I've seen other kids in the hospital with different types of leukodystrophy. And most of them are in some sort of vegetative state. Some of them are older, they're teens or early 20s. A lot of kids don't even make it past 2, 3, 4, 5 years old that have a lot of these neurodegenerative disorders. So in one sense, Liam is doing great. He's 8. has friends, swims, you know, plays with stuffed animals all day, wrestling. Like, he's very verbal and interactive and lovable and sweet. And he's doing pretty well considering having a horrible diagnosis. But then on the other hand, I mean, I take videos of everything, and I can see even from a year or two ago, he used to be able to sort of write his name a little sloppily, but I just looked at a video the other day and he can't do that anymore. He doesn't draw pictures. He doesn't enjoy arts and crafts like a lot of kids because he has a tremor in his left hand with fine motor activities. He can't play soccer or baseball like he used to. I see how slowly it creeps in to where you almost miss it unless you're looking for those fine details. And you can't help but go to a place where you wonder what another 10 years is going to look like. And it's like, today I'm extra emotional. It's June, and this is the month Ethan died, June 30th. So I think that has something to do with it. But, you can't live there. You can't stay in the state of grief and despair all day, every day. It will really consume you and kill you, I think. So I give myself time when it hits. I let it hit. I don't try to push it away, because then it builds and builds and builds, and this is kind of what would happen. But when it first happened, I read a lot of books and a lot of spiritual podcasts, and those are actually podcasts are tremendous resources. People that have been through it, and there are a few that I really honed in on. And one of them said, I can't remember her name. I try finding it, and I just can't remember what I'm searching or what name to search for. It's someone in Australia. And when she lost her son, she got very curious about, like, where does this grief come from? Like, what makes it so much deeper and heavier than losing a parent or losing a dog or losing even maybe a spouse. And she I know it's so cliche to say, but like, she leaned into it and she got really curious about the dark side and and where it can take you, and what powers it has to move you into better states of being than where you're at now. Because where we're at now, or in this exact moment, like, I'm incapacitated, but tomorrow my heart will soften again. It will open, and I can move through it and then be more present with Liam. And, through that, I make better choices for him. I try to find activities he can do with other kids. It takes a lot of effort in the special needs community to find community and kids that are on the same level as him. But I become a better person when I really let it take over me, in a sense, so that it can move through me. Otherwise, it's for naught. What is the point of this? And then we can focus that energy into the Coates Plus Foundation and writing that I do, and a documentary that someone wanted to potentially make on the family. So
We've this has been an evolution of the soul, just flat out. And I just want to take the moment to just say the evolution in a very difficult time that I've seen with Danielle to where she's evolved has been touching. And I'm an attorney. I'm okay speaking in front of people. And while I have a story from the masculine perspective or the male perspective about how to handle these situations and be the strength, there's an equal, even more compelling story that needs to be told from the feminine, from the mother's perspective. There are children that grew inside of her, that mother's love. That's something that, as much as I love my kids, I'd be remiss to say there's nothing stronger than a mother's love. And recently, Danielle's been stepping into her voice. She was invited to speak at Joe DiMaggio's Children's Hospital, and she crushed it. She did a great job. We had an opportunity to be on the radio, and she was able to speak about the experience, and then she's here today. And it's important because vulnerability provides space. It provides permission for other people to know they're not alone, to grieve, to take radical acceptance of yourself and what you're going through, and that we are called to share our story with the world as you are. And this is a very necessary platform that collectively we're all stepping into. Ethan passed just about a year ago, June 30th, 2024. And I feel that he is guiding us. He hasn't left us. I feel that there's more going on with him than we even see in the flesh. Now, that flesh, that child, his smell, his hair, his giggle, his arms wrapped around me. I miss that child deeply, deeply. But also I take comfort that there's something that encompasses that body, whether it's outside of it, inside of it, that spiritual sense, that this all had to happen. There's a reason for this, and that soul is guiding us to where we need to be. And with that soul, with that soul guiding us, we may be able to save his big brother. And, being in the situation, it's it leads to all types of things you don't really think about until it happens or it's about to happen. But Liam asks about his little brother. He's grieving too. And thank God he doesn't know he's sick too. And I'm dreading the day that we ever have that conversation. And you know what? On the other side, I hope we do. Because if we have that conversation, it means he's doing all right. And he understands it. And maybe we save him. And we can say, hey, yeah, it sucks. But you're here today because of the action that we decided to take. Maybe it's not us. Maybe it's something living through us. But the decisions that we try to take. But, it's difficult. We watch Lion King. And it hit me that it's constantly on his mind because when Mufasa dies, Liam's happy. He's happy because now Mufasa could be with Ethan. And it leads to a whole nother, question about how's this affecting him losing his little brother? Does he pick up on the fact that he may not be okay too? We're just trying to create the happiest environment for him we can. And we're trying the best we can. And it does seem insurmountable at times. But you have to focus on what you can control. There's stuff you can control and there's stuff you can't. And just if you could do the best you can in that space, you might get there. Ethan, when he was here, it was a lot of work. Okay. Buzzing of that machine, I don't miss. He had a G-tube. And, we had to find P-packs for him to play. While we're, we're trying to care for these two special needs kids while you're battling the disease, while you're trying to find a cure. And oh, by the way, you got to put a roof over your head. But I'll say this, is that I would, as much work as it was, I would do that every day for the rest of my life if he was still here. But again, I know he is. His flesh may not be here, but his essence, his spirit, that matter that is now energy, is here to guide us. And I think that there's a lot of comfort with that. And to what Danielle was saying is you could visit the pain, but you can't live there. You can't live there. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves of that too.
Thank you both for sharing that truth and that reality. I say grief is not this or that, it's this and that. It's living in the both and of life where multiple things are true at once. One part that just touched me to my core was when you said, I was going to ask you about how Liam's doing and his understanding of what just happened and where his brother is and does he understand about his own condition and what that means for his life to obviously to at an age appropriate level. When you mentioned The Lion King, that was my favorite movie with my brother. So when you said that, I was like, wow, that just those little things, it's the little things that just pull at the heartstrings the most sometimes. When he said, oh, good, now he gets to be with Ethan. I got chills because it's him understanding to some degree what's happened. And I also hear that he understands a bit of the continuity of life after life and perhaps the reunion aspect of it, which is bittersweet and also beautiful. It's the both and of things. I also hear that you can't stay there. We have our daily lives to function. We do feel our grief. Danielle, I heard you say that you lean into your grief. I heard you both say that you both lean into your grief, and that is the way through. I completely agree with that avoiding and pretending like this isn't happening is not helpful. If anything, it adds layers to the suffering. But you're so brave, and I use that word lightly, but I see you. I see your pain, and I see what you're doing just to put one foot in front of the other every single day as best as you can and give your son, Liam, the best life possible. As far as the foundation, what is your mission with the foundation? I know you have 4 pillars that you perhaps can address. And I hear this story, I know you personally, but I feel like if somebody's listening or watching and you could just on a human level relate to the loss, the pain, the hope, the struggle, the wish for the best outcome possible, how can we help? The floor is yours to share however you like.
Great question. Happy to answer. And to help I'm going to speak to a few things here. How to help our specific cause, and then how to help the general rare disease community. Specifically for our cause, we do have 4 pillars or 4 streams, if you will. And the first is fundraising. We need to have capital to run the rest of our operation. So if you're interested in donating to the Coates Plus Foundation in our cause, if you go to coatesplusfoundation.com, there's a donation tab. More than happy to take donations that way. Or you can reach me at bryan@coatesplusfoundation.com if you want to pay more direct or have any other ways to help. That's obviously the first pillar and very important. The second pillar is awareness. It's a very newly understood disease. Matter of fact, when it pops up on an MRI, it could be easily misdiagnosed as some sort of infectious disease of the remnants thereof. The eye conditions that manifest, it could be seen as some sort of variation of retinopathy of prematurity. So we need to educate NICU teams, doctors and nurses, as well as ophthalmologists on the pediatric front, because on the first lines to be able to identify this disease, and the early identification leads to earlier intervention, which leads to better outcomes for these children. So that's something that we're looking to do as well. Now, again, in order to bring about that awareness, we need to have funds. Myself, Dr. Royo, who's the head of our medical team in the foundation as well, we need to start circulating within NORD and these other institutions to bring about this awareness. There's a whole process here. The next pillar is research, okay? Research, obviously, that is the ultimate level that we're on, and we need to have funding to be able to fund that research. Now, because I'm fighting for my kid's life, really that research arm is kind of myself, just, pushing it forward, but we're finding other allies within that realm. So if there's any other type of gene doctors out there or a connection with a geneticist that has similar passions, if you want to reach me at bryan@coatesplusfoundation.com, and that's with a Y, BRYAN. We'd love to have any conversation if you feel like you're in the space to help. And just like the old saying goes, everyone's worth a cup of coffee. You never know what you're going to learn from somebody. You never know what it's going to lead to. And then the fourth pillar is about giving back to these families. We consider ourselves, as awful as the situation is, to be blessed in the sense that we have support from a family. We have support from each other. I have a career where I have a little more flexibility so I could do other things. I couldn't imagine a single mother going through this, okay, or somebody else. So we're very mindful of how can we give resources to families that are going through the battle with this specific condition. We are also on the forefront of interconnecting more of that community, not just finding numbers, but providing value and updates with them. So that's something we're working on as well. And that's the fourth pillar, is that community give back. So that's specifically how to help the Coats Plus Foundation. I will take the moment to promote. We have a huge, fun golf tournament coming up in Coral Springs. It's at the Country Club of Coral Springs. It's taking place on June 13th. That is the Friday before Father's Day. It's a sentimental date because that is the day before my birthday and also my dad's birthday, because I was born on his 31st birthday. And on a, sadder side, it is the anniversary of when we placed Ethan on hospice. And we feel it's appropriate to do it in his name, to raise funds to fund the apparatus of everything I just discussed. So if anybody's interested in that, feel free to reach out. I'm also blasting on Facebook, and I think it's going to be shared through the podcast about how to sign up. We are taking sponsors through the end of this Friday because we have to produce the merchandise for those sponsors. But it's going to be a fun event. We're also later on this year going to have a charity poker tournament. So that's going to be fun too. So, not everything has to be set. Why don't we come together and have a good time while we're raising money for a great cause? So that's our thought process. Now, how to help the overarching mission of the rare disease community and families. All right. This is important. If you are so called or you're going through a rare disease battle of your own, I'm in the process of working with other people to create a platform where families don't have to go through what we went through. Okay. When we got the diagnosis, it was like we were dropped on another planet with no map. We had to figure out that map and discover it and interconnect. And while there's some great resources out there, we also have to be mindful of the families that are caring for that rare disease child or family member need to be cared for too. Provide guidance, how to keep a marriage together, how to keep family together. There's a lot that goes on with this, how to keep a roof over your head without losing it. And we're very mindful of resources needed for that component too. There's a lot of wonderful organizations out there that are laser focused on the immediate needs of the individual that carries the disease, which is profoundly important, probably the most important thing. But we also can't lose sight of the caregivers in that individual's life and also the advocates that those caregivers need to become depending on that set of circumstances. And how do we support and how do we bring together those communities? So if anybody has any ideas out there about how they want to connect on that regard, feel free to reach me on that too. Again, Bryan with a Y at coatsplusfoundation.com. I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Bryan. And to clarify for our listeners, because this podcast reaches all over the world, so we're talking about the event on June 13th is going to be taking place in South Florida. But if you are listening and you're not in South Florida and the story resonates in any way, or you have some resources, or you say, hey, I know somebody that may be able to help, by all means, please reach out. I'm going to post Bryan and Danielle's foundation information and contact information in the show notes. Please, please, please reach out. At the end of the day, I think it's very clear that time is of the essence and every little bit helps, whether it's financially, research, supporting the community, awareness, any of the pillars, and just helping people get through this thing called life that sometimes life's a little too hard for our liking. I also want to acknowledge how much June carries for you both and for your family. It's celebrations and it's the, first anniversary of Ethan's passing. And, in life, it just keeps going. So in a way, I'm honored to be able to release this episode in June in honor of Ethan, in honor of Liam, in honor of yourselves and the families facing this reality. Because like you said, the person affected is the center of the concentric circle, but it expands from there on out to, family members, community, and so on and so forth. So we hear you, we see you, and we thank you for what you're doing. Is there something you would like to share with the audience that I haven't touched on? Is there something, it could be personal, it could be about, marriage, spirituality, your son, your wishes, anything that feels
Um,
important to add to this conversation? Thank you.
I'd say I think you may have touched on it, and you're the first person that I've ever heard say it, um, about it not being. I can't remember exactly what you said, but the point is, you can still enjoy life and engage in it and have fun, and still be grieving and in despair sometimes. But it it doesn't have to be your whole framework of how your entire life is. It can be both at the same time. And I wish someone had given me permission to have that. Because I thought once you lose a child, that's it. It's kind of like you're in mourning the rest of your life. But it doesn't have to be like that. It can still be deep and beautiful and enjoyable. So if anyone needs to hear that, I give you permission for that.
Thank you, Danielle. What is something on that note? What is something that was helpful to you personally and to you both during the loss of Ethan and throughout this whole process? What's something that's been particularly helpful, whether it's something somebody did, said, or the way in which they showed up?
I'm gonna take this one. I have grit. I'm pretty tough. But when certain relationships in my life aren't where they should be, I begin to fracture. And there was a point in this journey where I found myself fracturing. And there's two things that I did. Is I did start going back to church, and I found a wonderful church. And while, I have my own thoughts, I feel if you find a healthy church where you walk out where there's wind in your sails or any other type of religious place, that's fine. Not the dogma and don't do this, but I'm talking about wind in your sails and motivation. Whether you subscribe to the complete doctrine or not, but if you have those feelings, there's a place for you. Find it. I would say this: you need to connect with community, because the second thing I did was this, and this is something very near and dear to my heart as well. I had a close friend. By chance, we ran into each other. He was watching my story. Likewise, he had a situation where his sister passed during childbirth, and he was stepping up to the plate for the needs of that child that doesn't know their mother. We had a tremendous amount of respect for each other, and by happenstance, we go eat breakfast somewhere, a place we never go to. I see him in this courtyard; he's never there, and we cross paths. And it's almost, the question is, this coincidence? Are there really coincidences? Sometimes, you got to ask yourself that. And he said, "Bryan, I have this men's group that's coming to Broward, and we're starting this, and we built communities in college together." And he said, "I need you. Let's do this." And we did. And those seeds in being in a space, because women have a way of connecting that I think that men kind of struggle with. My role here in this endeavor is different than Danielle's. Okay? Just different. But as men, we have to be the rock. We have to be the solid one that everyone can rely upon when this going gets tough. And let me tell you, it's not easy. And finding a space where we have monthly meetings where 20 guys to a chapter, because now we have chapters, because now it's just flourishing, quite frankly, this concept, where men get into a room, we have a topic we discuss each month, and there's unlocking in the vulnerability, where we realize that we're all going through it. And we talk about business, we talk about spirituality, we talk about relationships, we talk about the fires that we are walking. And that group is called Gentleman's Tribe. All right. Gentleman's Tribe is where many chapters are springing up in South Florida area, but they're also coming to other cities as we see there's unlocking happening elsewhere. Matter of fact, there's a podcaster coming out to interview me sometime in July that's very interested in the concept and maybe interested in even having chapters in Utah. And we see this as something nationally that we could help, because right now we have a men's mental health crisis in this country. There's a healthy way to approach this, and there's an unhealthy way to approach this. And I think there's other people out there that I think you know what I'm talking about. This perception of what masculinity is, or manipulation, whereas masculinity needs to be grounded, it needs to be emotionally intelligent, it needs to be leaders, and it has to be more cerebral than, some guy in the parking lot trying to pick a fight. That's not what masculinity is. So what got me through this was the support of those brothers that I had during that time. And quite frankly, I don't know if I would have got through it. But I'm here today because of the support that I received from those men. Now, it's called Gentleman's Tribe for a reason. There was a time of the way people did life was much different. We had more community, more interconnectivity. Now we are in suburbia, and we have concrete that has walled off this connection, just the design of it. So how do we return? How do we remember and get back to where we were in that tribal sense of community? That you're not in this alone. And platforms like this are wonderful and great. And then the next step is, how can we do more to bridge those gaps and be a bridge to that connective world? And that's why I feel passionately about it. We actually have a radio show now. It's also on podcast. It's called the Gentleman's Tribe Show. We just launched this, so we're doing the best we can. It's my first rodeo being a host. But I think for launching, I think we did all right, But again, this is, I believe, the fire I had to walk in the becoming of who I am now for this greater cause. And I think that everyone that's walking the path of grief, which you're quite well, I wouldn't even call it lucky. I would say it's unique if you don't walk a path of grief. But I feel if you find a way to transmute that grief into something beautiful, the day will come where you're going to look back in life and you're going to say, I felt like the universe was working against me, but is working for me all along. And the people that we lost, those souls made the greatest sacrifice. And this is all pre-designed in our becoming of who we are and what we're supposed to provide to the world. It will all make sense one day.
Community is key, and grief certainly cracks us open. And when you lean into it, it realigns us with our true purpose. If that thought serves you, because I also believe we don't always have to make meaning of everything if we choose not to, or if we're not ready. If you do, it opens doors you never thought were possible. It opens connections that you never thought were possible. So much like what you said about your tribe, which is a very important and much needed space. I do have people that reach out and, men say there are no spaces for us. So I'm more than happy that that's wonderful that you created it. And I'm happy to share the information in the show notes as well. So if you're listening or watching, be sure to click on those links and access these spaces.
And going forward, if there are men that are reaching out to you with those feelings and connectivity, I would love to talk to them. So if you have people that have of interest, I believe it's part of my calling to gather that community. People need to realize they're not alone. Men need to realize they're not alone. Mothers need to realize they're not alone. And I just want to do my part in that endeavor. So if you do have men out there that have interest in that, I would love to keep an open line of communication between us to maybe there's something where I could help those men and bring them into the tribe.
Absolutely. So if you're listening and that resonates, reach out to Bryan. And Danielle, if there is anything that's in your heart to share about what was helpful to you, what is helpful to you in your grief, the floor is yours.
Yeah. No. So like Bryan had mentioned earlier, I went down this path of spirituality real deep, real hard, because nothing else really resonated. So I started reading the books, and I started listening to a podcast called Next Level Soul. And then it just kind of, the doors opened from there. And that was one of them, Michael Singer's The Untethered Soul. Right. How I, we hear this all the time now. It's very mainstream, but even like 10, 15 years ago when I first read this book, it wasn't to be the observer of your thoughts, to listen to the incessant chatter that goes on in your mind that is so negative and destructive, and to catch it in the very beginning stages before I'm reading the chapter about your heart closing and how that's the energy center of us. And if you can catch it as it's closing, you can release it and expand it and let the energy flow so much. And it makes your life so much better instead of becoming this hardened, walled off person. I see how people could go down the drinking and drugging route. I know how people isolate. I used to be excellent at that. I've been depressed more times in my life than I can count. And you would think this would really take the cake on depression, right? But surprisingly, 90% of the time I'm not. I work part-time. I take care of my son. Like, I have lots of friends. I do yoga. I dance. Like, I do stuff. And I owe a lot of it to the spiritual aspect. And the more I go, the more I want to keep going and learn about, I don't know if, I'm sure a lot of your listeners have heard of soul contracts and pre-birth blueprints. And I know people know about mediumship, and people have a lot of metaphysical experiences that now is talked about. I thought everyone sort of talked about this because it's all I listened to, but it's not as mainstream as I thought. And I hope people talk about that more. And we've had people that have come into our lives that have physically seen Ethan or gotten messages from him. I've had 4 people that have had dreams about him and then relay them to me. And that it just, it's the best because I haven't had them myself. I get signs all the time, but I ask for them constantly. And I take them when I see them. I don't second guess them. And I hope that, like, through sharing a conversation like this, people aren't so afraid just to share an experience or a story about it, because it makes what we've gone through so much easier and so much more deeper. Like, there's so many layers to being a human. I mean, that's a conversation for another time, but we chose to incarnate at this time, at this moment, where ChatGPT is available, where gene therapy and gene editing and CRISPR and Cas9 is a real thing, and it's actually saving lives. And we wanted to be witnesses to this. So we're here and we're doing the best we can with it.
That's right.
I love that, Danielle. And, I say to people who are, sometimes we're skeptical because this information is new to us, oftentimes, especially, signs and dreams and all these things. If it's helpful to you, if it felt like a point of connection with your person and your loved one, if it gave you peace of any kind or some hope, don't question it. Just lean into that and say thank you. I may not understand the inner workings or outer workings or any workings of how this all works. It doesn't matter. Did it feel like a point of connection and hope and love?
Yes.
I think, in my opinion, that's good enough.
Yeah.
And so I thank you very much for sharing that point.
Yeah.
That's very beautiful.
And it's and again, like me, attorney based, skeptic, very much grounded, and I feel that the whispers that came around me by and through my wife has had a profound impact on me. And I think that there's a point in time when you start understanding the universe and how it works, a point of surrender and saying, I'm being pulled in this direction. Don't resist it. Don't overthink it. This is my inward being of who I am, being outwardly reflected, and just go with it. And the universe knows, and just let it pull you and let it go. And I think that once you're able to do that, I mean, I'm in a space where, I think we're in a space where it's just the whole universe is coming to us now. And it's in large part because of the cracking, the breaking, and the surrender, and just letting it take us. And that's where this grief and this evolution of the soul has brought myself and my wife.
That's beautiful. And I hear it in your story, and I'm seeing it now. You both complement each other very well in this process. In a way, it's almost like the team that needed to come together for this life experience. And I think you understand that. I think you both understand that on a very deep level, it sounds like. And you're doing so much for the community. You're doing so much for yourselves and for your son. Even with what you've done to date, the world is better off with everything you've contributed. And I just know this is just the beginning. So thank you both for what you're doing. We're getting to the end here, and I want to close with a couple of thoughts. The first one is, what would you want the world to know about Ethan, or how would you like him remembered?
I wish people would know that even someone who can't verbally talk or walk and needs a G-tube to eat, there's still a tremendous amount of quality of life that special needs kids have. Even as a nurse, I didn't fully see that till I had Ethan. I thought they took up a lot of resources for a small amount of, it sounds so bad to say, but a small amount of payoff in the long run. But I feel horribly guilty thinking that now. But there's a lot that they share with the world for the small communities around them, for the staff when they go to schools. Like, they affect other people in other ways, and there's this huge ripple effect that I only am still learning now from teachers that that he used to have, and people that took care of him, and my in-laws and my own parents. We weren't familiar with the special needs community really, but there's so much quality of life that they have and joy that they give without asking for anything in return. It is a labor of love. There's no way around that. Anyone that has a special needs kid, or any kid, knows that. But they're here to advance our souls and to spread joy and to uplift. And I didn't understand that till I had my own.
Said. I think the thing I would want people to know about Ethan is that he was a teacher. Presence. All the things that affected us about the shifting of our expectations. Those were our dreams. Those were our desires. Ethan's experience was he was not thinking about crush in school or what job he wanted or what career path. He was joy embodied. He lived in the moment. He exuded love. And I think that that is a lesson for everyone else.
Beautiful. And we honor Ethan through this podcast episode, this heartfelt, vulnerable, and very open story, and everything you've shared so far. So thank you very much for that. Final question. What would Bryan and Danielle say to Bryan and Danielle after the loss of Ethan?
To take it real slow. That some days are going to be fine. And other days it's going to hit you all over again like it just happened. And there's no straight path. And you have to honor it every day, moment by moment, hour by hour sometimes, especially on anniversaries or important dates. There's no right way to do it. To really learn to love yourself, learn self-compassion, and to be very kind to yourself through it.
It's almost been a year. Just so much has happened in that year. In a spiritual sense, and other things and messages and actions that we've taken. When you ask the question, it does bring me to the day. It was raining. Anthony came to pick him up while I was in bed with him in hospice. He was at home. And I was woken up by the hospice nurse. Ethan was laying next to me, and she just said, I'm sorry. And I think if I could go back, well, they picked him up, they took his body outside, put it in this car, and we watched it drive away while the rain's coming down on us. And the feeling of our lives will never be the same. And if I could go back to that day, and I could talk to that Bryan, I would just tell him to be patient, to be present, and that the universe has plans, and this will all make sense one day. But one day at a time, one step at a time, Bryan. Keep moving forward. That's what I would tell him.
Bryan, Danielle, thank you. Thank you for being here today, for your generosity of time, for sharing your story, for your bravery and all you're doing. May this episode reach the right people at the right time. And if you're listening, I'm sure you've cried a few times here with us today. And if you have some answers, please, 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 call to action is to reach out. Thank you both for being here today, and thank you for being you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nina.
That's it for today's episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Grief and Light podcast. I'd also love to connect with you and hear your thoughts and your stories. Feel free to share them with me via my Instagram page at Grief and Light, or you can also visit griefandlight.com for more information and updates. Thank you so much for being here, for being you, and always remember, you are not alone.